How does a banana trigger a CIA-backed coup? Do AirPods herald the arrival of a new global order? What do LED lights say about the future of humanity? I'm Ed Conway, and in each episode of my new podcast, Stuff Matters, I take an object, crack it open, and reveal the world-shaping forces hidden inside. This is economics told through the things we think we understand. Search Stuff Matters on your podcast app to listen and follow.
Hello, good morning and welcome. It's Tuesday, July the 21st. Andy Burnham has just made his first policy announcement to help with the cost of living. He is scrapping the 5% VAT charge on electricity bills from October the 1st, which his government says will save £45 per household over the rest of the year and knock 0.14% off inflation at a cost of £850 million. But that's £45 off bills of £1,663 per year, which is the current cap, which for monthly bill payers is £3.75 a month. After the purge, the splurge. My name is Sam Coates of Sky News.
Oh, very good. And I'm Anne McElvoy from Politico. Andy Burnham has released a statement saying that this upholds the key promise of his campaign. I said I wanted to give people breathing space, and that's what I'm announcing on my second day as Prime Minister. The government says they're funding this through the cancellation of the digital ID programme, which it was announced on Saturday, claiming it was going to cost $1.8 billion over the next 3 years. Though I think you've heard, Sam, that was not exactly fully allocated.
No, what I was told by somebody who was in government until yesterday was that the digital ID programme didn't get actual spending allocations in either the spending review or the budget last year. So it was effectively an unfunded programme. It's very hard to prove these things because it's not in any public document, but that's what somebody said before we knew that was Andy Burnham's plan. Right. But this does mean that Andy Burnham's gone through with a plan to scrap VAT on energy bills that was looked at by Keir Starmer, but ultimately rejected. I heard that they looked at every different possible permutation of trying to cut energy bills while Keir Starmer was in Downing Street, right down to having models, sort of visualised models of all the components of energy bills to sort of pick apart different bits and chose not to do exactly what Andy Burnham has done. But choices require different priorities, and that's just what Andy Burnham has come in to do. So he has gone for something more expensive and more universal, and that is the decision that Andy Burnham's decided to start his premiership with.
Well, I think the symbolism of acting fast to deliver cost of living relief clearly won out there. The Tories in Reform had also been calling for scrapping VAT on energy bills alongside so-called green levies, but they weren't in this announcement. Former Chancellor Rachel Reeves, exactly as you suggest, Sam, she'd considered the move before the 2025 budget, didn't go for it, I think largely because of this argument that it would disproportionately benefit better off people with larger homes. And the other question is this mysterious issue about how the digital ID programme was supposed to be funded, and therefore how could you save the money if it weren't allocated? And following your breadcrumbs trail a bit on that, I also poked around. And as far as I gather, there was no new guaranteed funding for the Brit card. There was one thing on the record, that was the then digital minister, Ian Murray, telling a parliamentary committee that it was going to be scraped together from other departments and investment pots in digital. So it does look a bit shaky to say that this is a saving when it's not clear what you were saving it from, but I might be being too stringent.
Andy Burnham's government will this morning present this as a big bang, but I just want to go through some of the key numbers to give you some context on the £45 reduction. Now, the energy company E.ON have been doing forecasts, projections on the sort of path of the energy price cap. The latest one they did was actually yesterday. So the energy price cap now is £1,663, right? It then rises, not accounting for today's help, by £84 to £1,747 in October, and then rises again by a further £91 to £1,838 in January, the kind of height of winter. So to state the obvious, having spent £850 million, and I'm not saying it won't be welcome help, there is a real question about whether or not people will notice a £45 reduction against the scale of the rises in the energy price cap that we're currently anticipating. So that's the first problem. But there's another big thing, Anne. The press release says that the £850 million in funding is just for this fiscal year. So that's to April the 1st. So it's almost £1 billion just from October to April, 7 months. And it's not funded after that. But they're hardly going to go back and reimpose VAT on energy across Great Britain. By the way, it doesn't apply to Northern Ireland. They're going to have to find out a different way of getting help. So 7 months this is funded for through the 850 billion. But the revenue, the kind of sources of money, even if you do believe that there are savings that could be reprioritized, the press release says that those digital ID savings were 1.8 billion over 3 years. So there isn't an ongoing stream of revenue to fund this. This is a one-off pot funding the 7 months, but it's not clear what they're going to do after that. So if they're hoping the prices just come down naturally after that, well, they've not been following events in the Straits of Hormuz over the last few days because the oil price has been going up. So the funding of this beyond April is problematic, and that's basically, and the press release kind of admits this, storing up a problem for John Healey's first budget, on top of the £6-7 billion black hole left behind by the Defence Investment Plan. What a treat for the new man in the Chancellor's chair in Horse Guards Parade.
That is going to be one of the many commitments which seem to be being suggested or made by Andy Burnham. It's going to land back on John Healey's desk as the new Chancellor. As you said, Sam, the splurge came after the purge. Let's have a look at the purge in gory detail. Starmageddon. It took till 11 last night to name all 27 members of the cabinet, who will gather first thing this morning. Some were holed up in Downing Street for over 2 hours. There was a gap in the evening as the new Prime Minister took calls from leaders and had to keep his new cabinet colleagues waiting. That must have been a bit of a nail-biting waiting room. But yeah, it was quite the big ouster for a lot of people, wasn't it?
It certainly was. I heard that Bridget Phillotson had to be sort of contained in a pen for a couple of hours as Andy Burnham took calls from foreign leaders. And imagine being stuck with your colleagues, all of whom don't really know what's coming. It's sort of pretty brutal. But it meant it was quite late before we knew some of the biggest decisions of Andy Burnham's cabinet. So I think quite a lot of podcast listeners will be waking up to a lot of these names fresh. So Wes Streeting goes to defence, Lucy Powell to education, Miata Fanbula to energy and net zero, Alex Norris to justice, and Yvette Cooper to health, with Emma Reynolds doubling up in the Treasury as Chief Secretary there. 27 members of this cabinet, only 7 in identical or near identical jobs, the ones that they held the day before. 2 returned to their old roles, Angela Rayner back in housing, Johnny Reynolds in a beefed up business department, and an almost completely new top table.
It is. And really a cull of the previous era, especially those closest to Keir Starmer. And that message was clear. Labour is under new ownership. Around 12, I think, of the 27 in Starmer's government were kept on, 50 new faces, and still 3 or so members of the old cabinet who haven't received jobs, but haven't been confirmed to have left government either. Dan Jarvis, James Murray, Lucy Rigby. So those promoted in the later phase of the Keir era. It reminds me a little bit of covering the last Politburos of East Germany, and then you'd have these people who literally just moved in and then they had to move out again as soon as the Berlin Wall fell. Andrew MacDonald at Playbook writing that there is serious bad blood over the manner of this and the brutality of that purge. If you look at Steve Reed's resignation letter, making some pretty pungent points about loyalty and how he felt loyalty was important, by which he meant to say he'd been loyal, and he felt that the new regime wasn't being very loyal to people like him. Other criticisms Playbook were hearing last night from calling around was this lack of gender balance in the big offices of state compared to the Starmer cabinet, though I don't actually remember people being being very generous about gender balance under Keir Starmer. So maybe that's just always a sore spot for pretty much everyone. The full cabinet is 50-50 women and men, but then you can argue about seniority there and that lack of promotion for new MPs to full cabinet roles. But, this is the lineup that Andy Burnham wants. He'll never be as powerful as he is in these days. And he will say he needs the ministerial lineup that suits him. It's wound-licking time for a lot of those who were at the sharp end of that.
Oh, completely. I do think there is one wrinkle amongst the very, very top table. So what unites Anne, the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, the Chancellor John Healey, the Foreign Secretary Ed Miliband, and the new First Secretary of State Louise Haigh, they were all four of them were at the forefront of knifing Keir Starmer, right? So if you want something that's going to cause a little bit of bad blood, that is the thing more than anything else that connects those four individuals. And whether you like it or not, whether there are completely justified other attributes of those candidates or not, that is, they were the four punchiest people involved in the downfall of the last guy. But no job matters more than the Chancellor's role, and that caught almost everybody by surprise, and except for you, who had been tipping John Healey on this podcast multiple times. I was not receptive enough to that, so I hold my hands up and confess. But I'm really interested. What was it that made you to keep going with his name, even if I was too embedded in the conventional wisdom of Westminster and wasn't paying enough attention?
Oh, just being horribly persistent, I think. No, I'm going to own that one, Sam, because we all have to enjoy moments in our trade when we get it right. And you have plenty of times. In Healey's case, look, he had an interest in the number 11 job. I think that was known to his close friends. He's not a flashy guy, but he is quite capable of making his interest in a job known if he wants to. The point of this appointment to the Treasury was it was intended to cauterise that incredibly damaging row over the Defence Investment Plan, one of the big things that went wrong for Keir Starmer, and John Healey's resignation, the reason he quit government. And we've discussed many times the to and fro between the Treasury and the MOD and the Chancellor, indeed, then Rachel Reeves, and who was most to blame. But either way, here is a solution to that. Just make it the one person, as in make it John Healey. The other angle, which in some ways could point to a potential Achilles heel, an Achilles heel of John Healey, was that the defence establishment felt that he was a bit reluctant to rock the boat with the Treasury and with Reeves, and they thought that they could see this disaster coming on the black hole in defence spending, and thought that he ought to step up a bit more, bang the table. Some people used to say, we need a bit of the old Ben Wallace. I mean, he won't do it because he's such a party man, and he's maybe thinking that he wants to move to number 11 in his next job. So there was another clue. He was also economic secretary to the Treasury in the early 2000s, so he knows a bit about it. And frankly, from Burnham's point of view, when he ran the rule over all the candidates, John Healey just keeps popping back, as he did to my mind, because he's reassuring, old school to an extent, but he's not going to strike people as being someone who doesn't know the ropes. The question is he going to be more than just a safe pair of hands?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely bang on. There is something of the sort of split the difference candidate about him, somebody who was neither going to rile up the backbenches, but also not instantly rile up the markets either. Did a tiny touch of the Alistair Darling about him, if it goes well, who was Gordon Brown's Chancellor, of course, in the back end of the 2000s, although unfortunately for Gordon Brown, ended up developing too much of an independent mind for the then Prime Minister. John Healey, of course, was very close to Gordon Brown, private secretary in various roles with Gordon, and I think in that capacity knew people like Ed Miliband quite well. I suppose I've got two very big questions about John Healey taking the sort of chair in the Chancellor's office. The first is whether he's just going to end up being sort of maybe even reluctantly a sort of expensive Chancellor. In his resignation letter as Defence Secretary, he blasted one thing more than anything else, and that was the fact that it was the Treasury who's just taken over, he blamed the Treasury for blocking a date for getting defence spending to 3% and then 3.5%. Now, presumably, either explicitly or just implicitly by putting him in the job, there is now an agreement that he's going to sort that out, presumably in the first budget and spending review, right? That would be the logic of his appointment, which is a huge additional uplift in spending, right? So where's that going to come from? Is it more borrowing, defence bonds, and all the rest of it? And then the second big challenge that I think is quite tricky is my criticism, or rather the analysis of many people about John Healey's time in the MOD is the sort of pitfall is slightly different to what you were suggesting. John Healey went through a strategic defence review where he suggested that the uplift for the MOD budget was 2.5% and that would work. And that all came out in the summer of last year. Then, come December, he was presenting to the Prime Minister the idea that his department had a £28 billion black hole. And in the kind of entrails and the sort of the briefing wars that followed, people like the CDS at the time, Chief of Defence Staff at the time, were saying we knew that the amount of money in the summer defence review was not enough, but we all just kept stum and then presented this big bill at the end of the year. So my question is this: did John Healey actually have a proper grip on the finances, or was he just sort of willing to go along with sort of the fiction that he got enough money in the summer because he knew he'd come back for more? Or, did he not realise what was going on, and did he not have a sort of close enough eye and understanding of the numbers? But any which way, whichever of those it was, that's not great. That's a cabinet minister not being properly across the numbers in their one department. And now he is in charge of the finances in all the departments. So that's my red flag with this appointment. Is he actually good with the numbers, despite the bits of experience that people could point to? There are other great officers of state. Ed Miliband as Foreign Secretary. Good luck with the special relationship. Shabana Mahmood stays at the Home Office. Good luck with immigration reform. And Louise Haigh to First Secretary of State. What do you make of the top table, Anne?
Well, I can't resist a to and fro with Sam Coates about defence spending, because we have a bit of a historic difference of opinion on this one, don't we? Because yes, John Healey, I'm going to do this quickly and I promise I'll move us along, Sam. But John Healey did oversee the defence review, but the implications of cost and the challenges of what was happening in Ukraine were well known to the Prime Minister, or should have been, and the Treasury. And as the threat level intensified, and you could argue that it also did so after the Strategic Defence Review, I think you could very much, going back in time, make it a case that the SDR itself should have had much more financial plugging in, as opposed to, look, here's what you need, over to you, government. It should have perhaps it should have been set up in a different way, but that's going backwards. So you could also say, as a criticism of John Healey, which I have heard, that he failed to grip some of the failings of the Ministry of Defence. I mean, slightly to your point, did he have his eyes there internally on the money problems in the department and the efficiency problems, or was he on the international stage and going off and doing that side of his job a bit more? And that he soft pedaled a bit with Starmer. So they would be the criticisms. But if there's a black hole of this size, what do you call it, 28 billion or thereabouts, it is a shared problem. It is getting worse because of the threat level to the UK. And Starmer was ultimately in charge. And either way, you need to enhance capability, even if you want to make those other changes. So yeah, it can't all just come down to John Healey. So Ed Miliband to the Foreign Office, a disappointment to his brother David, who had long talks with Andy Burnham, I gather, about a return. Ultimately, though, when you think about it from Burnham's point of view, he needs those big offices for existing big beasts who need to be satisfied and are going to be a problem if they're not, and therefore the other Miliband bro got it. Ed, not notably big on geopolitics, and 4 Labour people with long memories. Bumped into some last night who were around during this fraught vote in 2013 about what to do about supporting a potential attack under the Obama administration against the Assad regime in Syria after it used chemical weapons against its own people, including civilians. Ed Miliband then changed. It was leading Labour at the time. He directed his MPs to vote against it. The Cameron government insisted that he had promised he would vote for it, and that's still quite a lot of bad blood there actually across the benches. So that's something he says he's not apologising for. He made the right choice, but that hangs around. Let's see how he does on the international circuit, where he's a bit of a newcomer other than when it comes to things like the net zero and energy beats. And Louise Haigh, well, look, you've been sleuthing Louise Haigh throughout this challenge from Andy Burnham. She does get a big reward, doesn't she? She gets to sit at the heart of that operation with the big Duchy of Lancaster Cabinet Office, the nodes and points person for the Burnham administration. She's going to be incredibly important. I still don't exactly know what she's going to be important at, but I'm sure you'll be one step behind and sleuthing her even more.
For better or for worse, as First Secretary of State, she'll be in charge of everything.
In charge of everything.
Good luck with that, Louise Haigh. We're pretty much out of time, so the decision to give Wes Streeting defence is for another day. I've been sent details that apparently his qualifications include the fact he was enrolled on the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme and also did a visit to the Falkland Islands. So MOD in good hands. Lots of other questions about whether Lucy Powell is going to continue with the Phillipson reforms on Send, and whether Yvette Cooper feels like she's got big reforms to make at health, but she's got the social care brief, which is close to Andy Burnham's heart. So that's all quite tricky, but they're things for another day. I think it's capped at about 12:30 today, so I hope they enjoy the moment. The cameras usually go in for that, so we look forward at seeing their smiling faces, just like our smiling faces at the fact we've hit 20 minutes, Anne.
Well, you're certainly smiling if you're at the cabinet table this morning, and for those no longer at it, perhaps nursing a bit of a hangover today. And thoughts and prayers.
How does a banana trigger a CIA-backed coup? Do AirPods herald the arrival of a new global order? What do LED lights say about the future of humanity? I'm Ed Conway, and in each episode of my new podcast, Stuff Matters, I take an object, crack it open, and reveal the world-shaping forces hidden inside. This is economics told through the things we think we understand. Search Stuff Matters on your podcast app to listen and follow.